Oh. Hey there, everyone. I'm Hunter Myers, the host of the Brand Bite podcast and the founding creative director here at Virtual Design Co. I'm super duper excited to be welcoming Carla Shohet to the show today. So Carla is a trauma and narcissistic abuse recovery psychologist. She's a somatic therapist, a brain spotting practitioner, and a positive psychologist coach. That is a mouthful, Carla. So I want to give those reins to you. Tell us how you got into this in the first place.
Yeah, well, this has been a long time coming, and I've been a psychologist actually for over 2 decades, but more recently specialized in trauma recovery and narcissistic abuse recovery, because it's something I went through and a journey I went on myself on a personal level, and then decided to kind of niche down into this specific area of psychology because it's so very much needed. And, you know, you'd be surprised as we start chatting how much trauma can affect us in business as well, which has actually been my experience as well it affects every area of life. So yeah. But basically just means I'm a psychologist that doesn't just focus on symptoms management, but actually on root cause resolution, so that you can literally move forward and thrive and, you know, be, as we're all supposed to be, abundant in life, whether it's on a personal or a business level or both.
Yes. So I love that you immediately brought up that these can affect how you operate a business as well. Can you tell us a little more about that? I don't know if you want to share your personal story, which we all love to hear, but I know some of that stuff is very personal. But any way that this relates to business.
Yeah. So I'll start with my own personal business story, okay, just to, you know, inspire some entrepreneurs that might be struggling right now to know that it's not all lost causes that we come across, but it is a journey, okay, and on every journey there are going to be ups and downs, of course. And I started my entrepreneurial journey when I was in my early 20s. I had fallen into this employed career as an account manager in a very high level consultancy company, and I had made big bucks because it was the time of the internet boom, and you know, and so I decided at one point, right, I'm going to start a business. So I did, and I was very, very young, had very little experience. I'd always had an entrepreneurial brain, actually, because I think even as young as maybe as an 11-year-old, I'd kind of set up a stall and made magazines outside my mum's shop, you know, tried to sell. And, you know, when we first moved to England, I'm originally Italian and moved to England, I used to love something called car boot sales, which are basically like you sell your junk out of the truck, the back of your truck. You know, I always loved that kind of, you know, banter with people, and, you know, just having the freedom of having your own business as well really, really attracted me, because one of my main values is travel in life, and, you know, financial freedom helps with that. And obviously if you're employed, you'll always have, you know, a cap to your earnings. So entrepreneurship was always something attractive to me. And I started early because I had the money to invest in my own business, which was probably my first mistake, to invest all of my money in my own idea. And I did that with my then boyfriend, who's my now husband. We opened this actually incredible business, but within probably about a year of it, working really hard at it, we quickly realized, okay, we either keep the business or we keep our house that we'd bought. So we had to let go of the business. That really, really was hard. And we were actually pretty lucky because we'd been left in a lot of debt because of my choices within that business, made through my emotional brain of wanting to create this perfect business, which I now understand perfection doesn't actually exist, but it took us off plan, if you like. I spent a lot of money into the business that I shouldn't have to make it look a certain way, delayed the opening of our business by about 3 months because it wasn't quite ready yet. Anyway, so that was my first huge learning in being a business owner. And there were massive losses and it impacted our life. We had to end up selling our house to clear our debts, etc. And then I went back into employment, and, you know, but the entrepreneurial brain was still brewing in the background, was always slightly unhappy with what I was doing, didn't really feel kind of passionate about. I ended up in the oil and gas business, you know, in sales roles. And I really always loved the connection with people part, but never really loved anything else about the industry I was working in, or in particular. I think once you become self-employed and you've got an entrepreneurial brain to start with, and not everyone has the same ambition, and there's different levels of success that we all want, right? But I've always had quite big ambitions and quite big visions, and I became unemployable, I think, basically quite early on. After running your own business for any length of time, I think it can be really, really hard to then have to even ask for permission for holiday, or have to kind of fit in certain criteria that might not align with your values, etc. So I changed jobs a few times and quickly realized, okay, this isn't working. So I looked at retraining. I went down different routes, started different businesses, circled back over the years, and there were so many learning curves. And through all this time, I'm talking of a length of time of about 20 years, because I'd studied psychology at university. That was kind of always the basis of, I now realize, every business I'd ever had, because it was that human connection that I was always very interested in. I just hadn't quite figured out that was one of my, human connection is one of my biggest values, but I maybe was too young or not wise enough to realize that. And I had to go through this cycle of setting up a business, making just enough money, and then sabotaging that, which I now realize I was doing that. It was self-sabotage, because I had inner self-worthiness wounds, which I will go and talk about, which is probably the biggest thing that I want to talk about today, to share with people in business, so that they understand that when sometimes you get stuck in a cycle of, starting, stopping, going up to the top, and then everything comes away. It's almost like you're pulling your own rug from under your feet. It really isn't your fault. Okay. It's learned behaviors. It's stuff that's got stuck in our nervous system that actually then serves as a survival coping mechanism in our brain subconsciously, that stops us from achieving success in our life, in any area of our life, but particularly here, because we're talking about business, we'll focus on that. But yes, I ended up opening over time, I ended up opening a beauty business. Again, was that was probably one of my last most successful businesses that I opened from nothing. I started retraining, and I just kind of, because I thought, okay, well, this is one of my hobbies and passions, and it always has been. I'm quite a girly girl. So I thought, after several years, so after my first business that failed and we had to sell our house to recover the debts, I did go back into psychology eventually. After being employed, I thought, no, okay, I'll set up my own practice. And I started my counseling psychology practice, and I stayed in it for quite a long time, until at some point it felt very, very draining to me, because I was doing everything from a very people-pleasing part of me, and it became really, really heavy. And so I started to create this beauty business, started retraining it initially as a hobby. Actually, I was like, okay, well, I like this stuff. I'm just going to train in it just to see what I can do for myself and my friends. And by then I had children, and I always wanted to continue to have that freedom of choosing when to work, which I had with my counseling practice. This business grew from nothing, because in everything I did, I always gave 100%. So it became quite popular quite quickly. I eventually attracted a couple of investors, and I had just about signed for the first venue of many. There was a property kind of element as well to this beauty business, a commercial property aspect to it, which really attracted me, because that's another one of my entrepreneurs. We're all very multi-interested, aren't we, usually?
Oh, yeah.
We should multiply ourselves and do lots of things. And that's, again, another lesson. Focusing on one thing at a time is very, very important. It's something I learned over time doing this over many years. And COVID happened. So I had these two investors ready to invest in opening a chain of beauty stores with me. I thought, I've made it. This is my dream. I created the first one. It was, 100% 5-star reviews, lots of, hardly any marketing to do to create it, actually, because it was all word of mouth to begin with. These two investors seemed to have just come from nowhere, and suddenly COVID hit, and it was like, now what? And it was at that time when, the business plans that I had, which were supposed to work within 3 to 5 years, that's what our plan was. It just didn't work anymore, because everything changed right after COVID. And it was just like, so I had to let go eventually of after 3 months of trying to kind of delay and holding on, I had to let go of that first venue that was meant to be the first opening of this chain. And then I saw a plumber open in there, and it was heart destroying. It really, really was. It was soul destroying. And I actually went into a very, very deep depression for quite a while, still trying to hold on, trying to figure out, trying to rework the business plan. It was a really, really dark time. It was, there was no income coming in, because the beauty industry, like lots of others, was really hit badly financially from that perspective of, not being able to actually open to the public, etc. And I felt very lost. I was like, what do I do now? Once everything started to reopen and we returned to normal life, it felt really, really, I was in that deep, dark place that some entrepreneurs, I'm sure they must relate to, where you feel like, I'm too tired to start all over again. And, I had a choice, and the choice was starting the beauty business again, which I literally had no energy for. And actually the business plan just didn't work. It could have worked, but it would have taken 8 to 10 years now. And I had young children. And because of the nature of the industry, I knew I would have had to be, there, growing the business, present, in antisocial hours, evenings, weekends, which I didn't want to do. I didn't want to sacrifice, the young years of my young family to the business. So eventually, and also in that process of COVID, I also lost my 2 investors. And again, another choice I had to make. Do I invest this money, my own money, like I've done before, in this, despite the fact that these 2 investors who had a bit more experience in commercial property for sure, but also in general in business, were kind of pulling back and waiting. Do I really want to do this? And I'd been there before, investing all my money and then having to kind of go, all right, it didn't work, because sometimes it doesn't work. And, I decided to keep the money. I looked into trying to invest it in property and start that business. But I was in such a dark space, because I'd worked so hard for 4 years solid. And leading up to that, I trained with people like Tony Robbins. I don't know if you know some of these names, but I'm sure some of your audience will. T. Harv Eker, Robert Kiyosaki. I had invested a lot in my own personal and business development and really invested hard, not just financially, but in terms of time, effort, learning, passion, everything. I'd learned really from the best in the world, top global leading business mentors. And actually, that's one of the reasons why I managed to create such a successful beauty business, And, I remember one of them when I was in this training session, and he said to me, if you don't do this, I'm going to come and find you. His name was Blair Singer. And I did do it. And, but then I didn't. And it was like, and there was lots of shame as well around it, lots of kind of burden of responsibility towards my family, because here I am again, putting all this in and having all their backup and support, everyone cheering me on. And this and now we're back to square one. And I spent a very long time in freeze mode. Basically, I didn't do anything. I just physically and energetically just I couldn't move. And, and I kept looking back and I'm thinking, I could see a cycle here, bringing up a business to a certain point, and all of a sudden, for one reason or another, it disappeared, became big. And I mean, it'd been going on and on and on like this for, 2 decades. And I just had to take a look in the mirror and think, there's something else here that I'm missing. There is a lesson, because I truly believe that the universe, or whatever it is that you believe in, we get given lessons again and again and again in different forms and different shapes until we learn what we need to learn. So I knew that much, but I just didn't, I was like, what's the lesson here? I'm not getting the lesson. So I really did feel like it's probably one of my lowest rock bottoms of all the rock bottoms that I've been to. Because of course, with every and I forgot one big piece actually before the beauty business. Was it after? No, after the beauty business. I forgot one big chunk actually, which was I tried to pivot before I had to completely let go of, or I decided to let go of my beauty business. I decided to train with someone else in the online, a top level business strategist called Lisa Johnson. I've been on her podcast as well, where I was trying to learn how to pivot online during COVID. But again, it was, not the best time in my life. It was really hard. And actually through that process, I discovered that's when I really discovered actually that the thread that ran through all my businesses, what was that actually I just wanted to help people and have that human connection. I was like, this is taking me back to my psychology roots. So in that process, I created a huge community online for moms and helped them through the 2 years of, COVID on and off, and, tried to launch a program there for them to be more confident. But I didn't really have that much confidence. So it wasn't as big of a launch as I'd expected. So that was another kind of like, oh my goodness. And I now had my young children witnessing this. And, I really struggled with that, because I wanted to be this amazing role model of resilience, if nothing else, for them. And, you can have whatever you want in life, because that's what I do believe. We can have it all. I just didn't know how. Okay. And I felt like, being surrounded by consciously having surrounded myself, intentionally having surrounded myself with all these amazing business people, leaders in the online and offline world, I could see it was possible. But then I ended up in this space where I felt like, oh, okay, so it's possible for them, but it's not possible for me. And that kind of thinking keeps you stuck. But what I now know, and what I would love to share with your audience, is that it isn't mindset. That's what we get told all the time. Even as a psychologist for 22 years, throughout this whole period, is I did a lot of symptoms management, working with our prefrontal cortex, that part of the brain that is rational, logical, that part of the brain that we use for motivation and willpower. But all of that is always short term. There is something much, much deeper that runs our operating system, if you like, which is our deep parts of the brain. It's our subconscious programming that's, for most of us, been built when we were really, really young by our parents. And now it's outdated. And, we update our operating system on our phones or our computers all of the time. But when's the last time you updated yours, right? So everything that we don't know that we're doing, that we're not happy that we still do, but we seem to not be able to stop doing, whatever that is, whether it's, we're scared to grow because we're maybe scared of visibility, we're scared of success, we fear failure. All of those things are not your fault. They're just programming, okay, that was in childhood, maybe your coping survival mechanism on a nervous system level, on these deep parts of the brain, the subconscious parts of the brain, that are now driving you as an adult, have been known to you. And what is happening is that you're kind of blending with this coping mechanism that you had in childhood that served you really well, but they're now maladaptive. So they're actually stopping you because your brain doesn't think it is safe to go where it's not familiar. So in different ways, we end up in situations repeating old patterns because it feels familiar and it feels safe. For me, familiarity was failure in business. Okay. And that was stemming from a lack of self-worth. I did not feel that I deserved success. So whenever I did get to a certain level where I felt like, finally, it's success. It's my version of success. My brain went, oh, that's not safe. It's not safe for you to be successful. Because if you do get successful and then you fall back, how painful would that be? So no, let's just keep you where you're used to, where it's familiar and it's safe. Because the brain thinks, to our brain, familiarity is safety. So if you have experienced something similar to what I've experienced, of these massive up and down in your business, first of all, please know it's not your fault. No one chooses to go through this journey like this, okay? And it doesn't have to be like that. But the one thing that I didn't know, even as a psychologist for 20 odd years, is that we have to work in the deeper parts of the brain to literally reprogram our computer, our operating system, which is what's the driving force of us behaving in certain ways in adult form. Okay, it's almost like having a child with all its fears that it developed as a child, because we didn't have a rational brain when we were children, so we perceived everything, probably misinterpreting things about ourselves and creating these negative self-beliefs that sit in our subconscious. So we don't know what we're doing really most of the time, or if we know that we're doing something we don't want to do, or anything, or any of those behaviors that we feel like, I know I shouldn't be doing this, but I still do it. Why do I do that? It's not your fault. Okay. It's happening for you because your nervous system is an incredible survival mechanism. Okay. We're born with it. It is, our brain doesn't care if we're happy or unhappy. We have to be intentional about that. Our brain doesn't distinguish between real or imagined. Okay. It is just a machine that repeats patterns. Okay. So if the pattern is one of, money trauma that you've maybe learned through your parents because they always struggled with money, or they always had debts, or perhaps they were failing at business themselves, that's the stories you learn. And those are the stories that drive your nervous system. Okay. Those are the subconscious stories that make you who you are today as an adult. That's what's happening, whether you know or not. Abundance, I used to hear this all the time, being around these amazing, abundant business people. And I used to think, I get it. I understand that abundance is available to all of us. Logically, I get that. I see it. I see that there's abundance everywhere, right? There's an abundance of money, of wealth, of, health, of business, of customers. I always got that logically, but I just didn't get it. I really didn't feel it was available to me. And I just want anyone listening here today to know that if you're listening, there's a reason why you're listening. Abundance is available for all of us. regardless of our past, regardless of our present, where you are at now, regardless of the failures you've had in the past. Okay, those failures are just mistakes, lessons, okay, that you had to go through because you're not getting the message, which is, you have to work deeper. Okay, it's not about trying harder or working harder. The minute I went onto my own somatic inner healing journey, somatic means in the body, because anything we've experienced that has affected our nervous system, that's programmed us in a certain way, get stuck in our nervous system. Unless we go and work on those deeper parts of the brain, we just can live and die like this, operating the same way, like an old computer that's never been updated, sluggish, slow, not at the best its optimal performance. And so if we get the opportunity to work on our deeper parts of the brain and figure out what is going on in that operating system, and kind of rewire the operating system on the things that, it's not that nothing's working, it's some things just not serving us anymore, because we're now adults, we're not children that need protection like our nervous system thought we needed at that time, But often, we are operating as children in adult bodies without even realizing. Okay, so, but there is a way to rewire all of that. Thank goodness there are, from neuroplasticity of the brain, we can change anything that doesn't serve us anymore. We can figure out what it is that's stopping us. And then for me, the experience of accidentally falling into a somatic inner healing journey, where I did go and work on, because I was so depressed and down in the dumps, and I did it because I had to. It was either do that or die. And, I have 3 young children. They deserve to have a mother around. I had to go on that. That was my last chance. I was like, okay, well, I don't know what's going on. And I've been a psychologist for this long. There must be something else. So I tried it, and thank goodness for that day when I said yes to the nth training program that I went on, because it really absolutely changed my life. I now, once you understand how your brain works, how your nervous system operates, how you can change all of that, and how all of that is not your fault, you really truly can live in abundance in your personal life and in your business life. And that's what happened to me. I went from 0 to nothing within months. In less than a year, I created without even necessarily at the time meaning to. I just went straight. I literally just wanted to share. I started by sharing Instagram reels because of what I was learning on my healing journey. I wasn't ready to, the business literally came to me. And I used to hear this all the time. So I say this with a caveat, which is, I know that if you're sitting there listening to the podcast and thinking, yeah, great for you because you've got a successful business. I know, because I've been there. I used to think the exact same, okay? But I want you to know that there is a way of creating this for yourself as well, no matter where you are. It really is possible. I've just created and finished delivering my first trauma healing recovery program as well. And to see people understand this stuff, this is stuff that we should be taught in schools. We are taught about the digestive system, really important, but not about, how our nervous system works. My ultimate aim is to eventually, my ultimate purpose and mission in life is now to go and get to teach this in schools at high levels, in hospitals, because all of this stuff can change everybody's life, and we could live so much better for so much longer if we knew what I know now, right at the beginning when we start our journey, whether you want to be a business person or not, just in life in general, because these things affect, and we spend so much time at work, right? So, and, I believe, and I think everyone will agree, life's short. So we deserve to live to our fullest potential, feeling happy, feeling abundant, feeling joyful. Anything else is just kind of a waste, really. And, this information has been available, about the nervous system and something called the vagus nerve, which we all have. I won't go into detail, otherwise I'll get all psychology based. But, it's just such simple information that if we just knew this information, our life would be very, very different. And then anything is possible, literally anything. Because instead of us being scared to be ourselves, of being scared of, I'm not saying fear isn't necessary. All emotions are, and fear included. Okay, it protects us, it keeps us alive. But there's a lot of subconscious coping mechanisms that we developed as children we just don't need as adults. Okay, we need to basically unlearn what negative life experiences or misinterpretations we had as children about certain situations that we made mean with our little child brain that there was something wrong with us. We need to reprogram all of that, and we can absolutely do that, so that we can feel safe to be us exactly as we are, because, we are, each of us are 1 in a 400 trillion chance of being who we are, right? It's magic. It's like incredible and unique, and we're here for a reason. And, when you can align yourself and your true values of, without the masks that we all put on to pretend that we are this and we're that to keep safe. Okay. Often unconsciously we do that. If we just could take all that and feel safe to be us, we could create amazing businesses that are impactful, not just for ourselves, whether it's wealth or freedom or whatever it is that you are wanting to create your own business for. It can impact millions of other people, and generations further down the line. We are here, I believe, for a massive, massive purpose, each of us, with or without a business. But particularly in business, I see so many people. I work with a lot of other therapists, actually. Interestingly, I attract a lot of coaches, and we all do kind of. We attract like-minded people, and there are just so many that are, where I was a few years ago, and I just think, I'm going to change your life. If you can afford work. I mean, I feel so different now in running my business. I don't really even see it as a business. I literally see it as a mission. It feels like, a gift. And I feel so fortunate to have, been able to learn this stuff and to be able to share it across to other people globally to make sure that, if there's anything you want in life, you can absolutely get it. You can absolutely get it. Yeah. Sorry, I've talked to non-stop for about 60 hours.
I know, I love it.
Passion.
I love it. I'm like, oh my gosh, keep going. A question, as I was listening to you, number one, I want to say that I absolutely love that you brought up like the logic knowing versus the feeling knowing. This is something that I talk about with people a lot, where it's like, I don't understand why this disconnect is here. Like logically, I get it, but for whatever reason, I can't convince my body to get it also. And so something that I would really love for you to touch on, if you can, is when or how can someone start to recognize those patterns? So when can they start to recognize when there's the disconnect between the logic and the feeling, and start to realize, okay, like I can make a shift about this. This isn't how it has to be, but they have to notice the patterns first, correct?
So that's a really, really good question. You have to do somatic work. So you have to work in the body, because a lot of us, what happens is as the ultimate coping survival mechanism in our nervous system state, called the dorsal vagal shutdown or freeze mode, we dissociate. And what that does, we have a numbing part. I work with internal family systems kind of perspective as well, which means that, there are no bad parts of us, all these kind of ego states or sub-personalities that we all have, the voices, the inner critic, and, the guilty part. There are no bad parts of us. So they're literally just nervous system coping mechanisms that developed to protect us from feeling not good enough, not important, not lovable, not deserving, or whatever it might be for you in childhood. Okay. Because in childhood, to feel like that is actually dangerous. It's life-threatening, because if it's true that you're not good enough and your main caregiver also sees you as that, then you might not be fed and you might die. Very basic explanation of how the brain operates as we grow up. But now you're an adult, that's not the same. Okay. So in order for you to start to understand the first signs, you have to work somatically in the body, which is what you don't do in talking therapy. Because talking therapy, like counseling, like I used to do for many years, engages the prefrontal cortex part of the brain, that logical, rational part of the brain. And that's not where trauma or stress or negative self-beliefs are stored. They're stored deeper in the body, in the fascia, actually, which is this kind of jelly-like substance that wraps around all of our muscles and all of our organs. And, if we removed everything from the body and just kept the fascia, we'd be like exactly the same shape, but just transparent. So all those stress hormones that that our body releases when we are going through adverse events or stressful events, challenging stuff that our nervous system cannot cope with in the moment for whatever reason. Maybe you're already at full capacity, overwhelmed, or you've been through other stressful stuff and your nervous system is already not as flexible as it ought to be able to deal with those challenges. Then those stress hormones flood our bodies in those moments. We don't know how to cope, and they literally get stuck in our body and they stop us from feeling. Okay. And in order to be able to know what's going on with us, we need to feel. But unfortunately, if we've been in either this kind of sympathetic kind of always on eggshells, run, go fast, don't stop, because otherwise if you stop, what might happen? And that's the first part of the survival nervous system, where you're always on the go, always rushing. You feel like you can't breathe. You're in that fight flight mode, always feeling like there's a danger about to happen. When you've been in there too long, your nervous system gets absolutely exhausted and it shuts you down and goes into the next level. It's like, now it's not just danger. is life-threatening danger. So the best next thing it can do is literally shut you down. And this is how you see a lot of people, business not living their life. It's not living, it's existing. It's that kind of autopilot mode, that robotic kind of, you're here in body, but you're not really here. It's like you watch TV and you have to keep rewinding because you're like, oh, what did they say? Or reading 3 pages of a book and not knowing a word you've read. And, all of that is happening as a protection mechanism to numb you out from feeling. And in order for you to know what's going on, you have to become consciously aware of what's going on. Okay. So you have to literally reconnect to the body. So talking therapy might work, and I'm not dismissing it. I did it for many years, and there is a place for it. This is about symptom management. It can give you validation when you talk about your problems with someone. It can make you feel better. It can give you coping strategies like cognitive behavioral therapy would do. So in the moment, you can do stuff to kind of continue to survive, but we're not here to survive. We're here to thrive, right? We're not just here to exist or survive. That wasn't the point of being born. We're here to thrive and get to the next future self, higher version of ourselves, which is a constant evolvement. It never stops. It's a journey, right? It's a journey of discovering what our next full potential is until we are no longer, and who knows what happens next, right? But in order to start making the shifts, you really do need to work in your body. And that's what, because stress is an embodied experience, as I've said. The hormones that are released get stuck in our body, then we get really tense, we get pain. And over time, all the stress hormones, if we're not able to release them, because we, unlike animals who shake out their stress, I don't know if you've got dogs, but you'll see dogs or wild animals do this when they've experienced something stressful. I see it in my dogs. If you tell them off because they've done something they shouldn't, they're like, they shake. They shake out their stress hormones. We don't do that. So we keep suppressing it then because society or our family has told us that it's not okay to express anger, to express emotion or tears. So everything gets pushed down, but eventually everything surfaces. And something you said about, having this, what is called cognitive dissonance, where your head and your heart are not in agreement. It's really, really uncomfortable. We literally become uncomfortable in our own skin. We've got this constant cognitive, it's a constant internal conflict. We think one thing and we feel different. We want to say no, but we say yes, or we feel like, we should be doing this, but we do that. And it's really frustrating, but we don't know how to untangle that because we think it's our fault. That's why I keep saying, it's not your fault, but you can't talk yourself out of this stuff. This is not stuff that you can motivate yourself out of or talk yourself out. Otherwise we all would. And we can motivate ourselves with willpower for short bursts. We can all get to certain places, but then if you're constantly finding yourself in this kind of push-pull effect where you're kind of always pinging back like a what are those things called that you pull back and they spring back up, it's because your brain is doing that. You're not doing that. No one chooses to lose their business, to lose their money, or kind of go into these kind of dips every so often in their life when they've been trying and working so hard to get to the opposite side. Okay. The work is to be done somatically in the body. It's an embodied experience, and you need to go and figure out, you need to get back in touch with your emotional brain that is connected into the body, okay, via that vagus nerve as well. The limbic system, the brain stem, not the prefrontal cortex. And it's not that we don't need the prefrontal cortex, but we need to understand that those deeper emotional parts of the brain are so much more intelligent. There's something called interoception and there's something called neuroception, all part of our nervous system, that it through our senses, we're always scanning, for our environment and telling us, everything that we actually need to know, but we lose touch with all of that. We literally just go like with heads. We're just heads. We're all up here. We all think, analyze. But actually all the information below the thinking brain it's so much more. If you think of the emotional brain, the deeper parts of the brain process at 11 million bits of perceptual information per second. But the thinking brain, which we are stuck in a lot of the time, overthinking, looping, thinking, ruminating, and all this, it's 10 to 60 bits per second.
Oh, wow.
So that's the part of the brain where if you look at water, it will go, oh yeah, H2O, and it kind of reduces it, minimizes it, rationalizes it. Whereas the feeling brain, the emotional brain, oh, it's cold, there's fish in it, it's refreshing, it tastes pure, whatever. There's so much more information that we don't take into account because we can't, because we've learned not to listen to our bodies. We've learned to kind of, it's like being in a relationship and, you know, with someone you really, really love, and all of a sudden you stop hearing them. And the body's always screaming at us with this information. Neurotransmitters always traveling up and down this vagus nerve from the gut to the brain. Mostly 80% goes from gut to the brain, but we ignore all of that and we just focus on the 20% that goes from brain to gut. It's the wrong way around, because we're not taught this stuff. We don't know this stuff. So we then just kind of live our life like a leaf in the wind, being driven around by these sub-personalities that developed when we were so young, and they all have loving intention of protecting us, but they're not serving us, because we're not little children anymore. We're actually adults. And there is a way to step back into the driving seat of your life in true self and adult self-leadership, and take charge back of your life and drive to where you want to go. Okay. It's just about reconnecting to your body sensation, and start listening in, which is not easy to do. It is without guidance, at least at the beginning. I wish it was. You know, you can make a definite start. There's lots of things like meditation, you know, breath work. The thing is, when you start doing the practices, we know the practice. I think a lot of people just need to know why they're doing these practices. Otherwise, it doesn't make sense. And then you stop. You're just doing it because someone's telling you it's good for you. But actually, if you start to understand how it actually affects you on a body, on a nervous system level, oh, now it makes a difference. And now you can start to reconnect with your body and see, you know, how your emotional brain is actually affecting you as an adult, because there is a massive difference. And, you know, the truth of it is, because of how our brain actually works physiologically, when we go and operate from our emotional brain, we literally, you know, like you could be having a conversation with your friend, really rational, or maybe a sibling or a partner, you know, you're having a really rational, nice conversation, and then 20 minutes later, you're like in a screaming match. We can literally flip our lid. And actually, when I say flip our lid, if you think of the brain, the prefrontal cortex, in those moments when something triggers us to go back into that kind of emotional brain, you know, the brain perceives something, anything that makes us feel how we already feel about ourselves, like we did as children, not good enough, not important. We literally get triggered and we go back into the past parts of the brain, and we start to operate from the emotional part of the brain, which is why it wins over logic every single time. We cannot, we have to find ways to bring our prefrontal cortex back online. It's almost like you've gone offline, you know, the router's off, you can't think now. So you then operate from an emotional only basis, which is, you know, particularly in business, is never the best thing to do. You need both. You need the rational brain, and there is a way, there are things you can do to just kind of operate from a wise mind. This is a positive psychology intervention. I don't know if you've heard of the wise mind chair work. Fantastic. You know, this is one of the things, but even that needs to be done. You know, I'm a positive psychology coach, and a lot of that is about kind of, and it is a scientific, you know, evidence-based science on how to, you know, thrive. And, you know, it's about what's right with you, right? Psychology focuses on the past and what's wrong. It's positive psychology. But if we only focused at the beginning with what's right with you and what's right for, you know, creating more success, it can actually become toxic positivity for people that have maybe trauma or unresolved stuff that's going on in their subconscious, in their subcortical brain. And they're thinking, oh God, I know I should do this. And you can do all the affirmation. I am confident. I am wealthy. I am good enough. Okay. But your feeling brain is going, no, you're not. No, you're not. And that will always win. The emotional brain always wins over the logical brain, because the logical brain, literally, when you have been triggered to go into your past and you feel in something or someone, and your brain's perceived it as it to mean that you're not good enough, you know, maybe you're, I don't know, in business, let's do an example in business, you've applied, or yeah, okay, so you're trying to win this client, and the client chooses to go with someone else. And where do you go with that? Oh God, I failed, I'm not good enough. It might not be any of that at all. Actually, the fact that your client chose someone else to work with doesn't say anything about you at all. But that's where we go, and we spin into this kind of rumination, and then that affects our next action, and it's a mess thereon. It actually doesn't, you know, how other people behave and their choices, that doesn't affect, you know, doesn't reflect on us at all. It's actually a reflection of their inner world and their perspectives, which are all to do with their experiences. You know, we can never really control that. But that's what we think. We end up thinking, oh God, you know, whenever something goes wrong, we think it's our fault. Oh gosh, you know, I could have done it better. And then we kind of spin into this negative thinking, We can change that, but it has to be changed at kind of base level in deep in the nervous system. Can't be done just out of kind of willpower. I'm going to think positive now. If only, I wish, and, that can feel really shaming to people, when you have subconscious things stopping you, because literally to your brain, I don't know, people may be struggling to go do podcast interviews to create visibility for their business, or do lives on Facebook or whatever, or go on Instagram and post. They really struggle. And then they go on to maybe, I don't know, social media management courses or whatever, or visibility courses. And they're like, just do it. Just post every day. Come on, you can do this, Well, you can, but it doesn't feel good. And eventually you're going to stop, because to your brain, becoming visible and making yourself bigger and more visible equals danger, maybe because of something that happened in your past. And unless you resolve that and change the brain's understanding of you becoming visible as being a danger to your life, you're always going to stop, And actually, for me, because we spend so much time in business, because we all have to earn somehow, okay, whether it's you working for someone else or for yourself, we should all be able to get to the point where we know this information and we can actually do whatever it is that we do to earn money by being happy, because it aligns with what we want to do, not because someone else is telling us or because we have to, but because it's actually a mission and a passion and a purpose. Otherwise, we're kind of missing the point of life,
Right.
I don't know if that answered your question.
It did. And I really like the path that we have gone down, where you've shared your experience and the challenges, and then how learning how to reconnect with that deeper self has actually opened up the doors that you were wanting opened up before, but didn't realize. So yeah. I know that we have spent a lot of time talking, and I want to, honestly, I'd love to have you back and chat more about this, but I want to wrap this up with one of my favorite questions. So you've been in the entrepreneurial space for a long time. You've opened businesses, you've closed businesses. And I'd love to hear, from your experience, if you could change one thing about the entrepreneurial space, what would you change?
About the entrepreneurial space, I think people need to understand that when you're trying to create a business, often we are the business. And if we're not investing in our inner workings of ourselves, our business is just going to be a reflection of us. Okay. So if we get stuck because we cannot do X, Y, and Z, our business will also get stuck. Our business will only grow to the extent that we grow. And this isn't about, now I understand, and I wish I knew this many, many years sooner. It isn't about investing in constant, training courses or how to do X, Y, Z. You need to invest literally in yourself, in your inner healing, so that you can step in your true full self, and you can trust yourself. You can feel safe to be you. You can know how to make decisions from that. The gut brain, okay? Intuition isn't woo-woo. It's actually science. We have neurotransmitters, as I said, 80% of communication starts in our gut and goes up to our logical brain, not the other way around. So if we can reconnect with that, decisions become easier. You become more aligned with what you're doing, and everything it's like you're in this state of flow that people talk about. It's a real thing. It isn't woo, it's science. Okay. And that's the thing I wish I knew, because I always, and people talk about this in different ways, right? They talk about manifestation, they talk about abundance, and it all feels quite fluffy, but there is science behind all of it, actually. And it's what makes me really excited to share about the nervous system and, how our brain works and how our body operates, because it's our operating system that affects every other aspect of our life and every aspect of our business too. Because then you're aligned with the right clients, you're aligned with the right team, you're aligned with the right everything, choices, partners, and that's what, that collaboration with the right people, because you're being you. If you're wearing a mask because you don't feel good enough, you are automatically aligning with the wrong partners, the wrong clients, and everything feels clunky and difficult. And eventually, long term, any relationship is going to suffer, because if you're not being authentic, eventually it's going to come out. And either you'll be unhappy because you've created something actually you didn't even want. When we're disconnected from ourselves because we're in that kind of survival or existence kind of numbing, dissociated state, we actually don't know even what our values are, what we want in life. We maybe get onto this kind of, I have to create a business because I need wealth. And I'll create a business like everyone else is creating. Everyone's after 10K months or whatever. And then you start to sit there, and if you take a moment to actually think about what you want, you might find that you don't even know. Is that what you really want? Just because everyone else is doing it doesn't mean that you have to have a business like that. And so we waste years, even when we're successful. I spoke earlier about, the fear of success or fear of failure. That can be a real stopper for us in business, and it just comes from a fear of being us, So yeah, I think that the most important thing is work on yourself, work on your nervous system, figure out what's going on with you on a subconscious level, change all of that so you can first and foremost be happy in your life, no matter what you do, and your business can then thrive and be happy alongside you.
I absolutely love that. So Carla, can you share with everyone how people can connect with you? I want people to be able to reach out if they have more questions. I know that there are like so many other things that we could talk about if we had time. So please, like, how can people reach out?
So I am on Facebook and Instagram. My name is Carla Shohet. Maybe I can share the handles with you if you want to drop them into the notes. And then you can connect with me on my website, which is currently being built. So it's very simple, but you can reach out to me on carlashohet.com.
Perfect. And is there anything else that you wanted to share with the audience before we hop off here? I'll make sure that I add all of this into the show notes, everyone, so that you can go ahead and access it at your
if you
will.
if you want to start learning about some of the stuff that can help you to start to unlock the conversation that I've had with you today about, how the brain operates and how it affects you in different areas of your life, you can pop over to my podcast where I talk all about this stuff. It's called Time to Unlearn, and you can find it on all major podcast platforms as well. And I'd love to have you over and let me know what you think.
Awesome. Well, again, everyone, I'm going to share that in the show notes. Carla, seriously, thank you so much for coming and sharing your whole experience and all of your knowledge and everything with us. It was such a joy.
Thank you so much, Hunter, for having me. It's been a pleasure.